Hey beautiful people, what is up and welcome back to my channel. I am Jamila and I love all things beauty. I love all things makeup, I love all things skincare, and I especially love sharing my tips and tricks for how to find high-end and luxury beauty products at bargain prices. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I would absolutely love if you would consider subscribing and joining the fam. Okay, so we have two eye look going on right now. You saw from the title and the thumbnail. Today I'm going to be giving you guys my review of the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal Palette. Now I'm calling this a review because I've done two looks prior to this and I filmed it and I just did these two looks, so at this point I feel like I have a good sense of the palette. Not gonna do live swatches, so the way this video is gonna work is I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of product details. I will insert some footage of the swatches that I did of this palette because it's a lot to swatch, and then I will do these two eye looks, come back and give you guys my final thoughts. Now, before we do dive into the product details, I do want to say that this was gifted to me by the brand. So a little story time, again, before we dive in. When Blend Bunny Cosmetics released this palette, I was pretty excited by it. You know, they had been teasing us with shades. They were definitely letting us know what was coming, and I was super excited. And then the brand released the product without sharing any swatches of the palette on deeper skin tones. And that rubbed me the wrong way, the way it does with every single brand that does that. As somebody of a deeper complexion, I rely very, very heavily on swatches to decide if I want to pick something up. Now, I know, don't come for me any comments. I know swatches don't give you the full picture of whether or not something is going to perform, how it's going to look on your skin tone fully. I get it. It doesn't give you the full picture. You really have to apply it to the eyes to figure it out. But I will say with full confidence, with my whole chest, swatches are the first line of defense for people with deeper complexions. The first thing that you do when you see a palette and you're interested in picking it up is swipe to see if there are swatches of it on a deeper complexion. Swipe to see if it's been applied on anybody of a deeper complexion, so you can figure out if it works for you. Now, I feel particularly strongly about this for indie brands specifically because when it comes to indie makeup, the process of trying and returning a product is not the same as it is for like a mainstream brand. If I want to try something in Sephora, I could return it. I could say, you know what, I didn't see swatches of this on a deeper person. I picked it up, I tried it, it didn't work for me. Here's Sephora, give me my money back. I could do the same with Ulta. But when you shop with indie brands, it's not that simple. So I think it's really important for these smaller indie brands to have that representation so people don't spend their money and they don't waste their money. And I've seen brands do that in some way. I know last year, or maybe this year, Glaminatrix got called out because they had released their Nocturnal palette. They were ready to launch and they didn't have any swatches on a deeper complexion. Now, it was a beautiful palette, but it was also quite expensive and coming from Australia. I don't have the kind of fluid cash to be spending money on a palette that may or may not work, especially when shipping to and from Australia or whatever it is like $20-something. I feel like as a brand, you should be providing people with the resources that they need to make an informed decision, because it's really hard to shell out that kind of money knowing that you can't return it or you're going to have any issues. Now, that being said, I did comment on the brand's page and said, you know, as someone of a deeper complexion, it's really helpful to have these swatches so that I can figure out if I want to buy this before it launches, especially for a launch that's really hyped like this and you know it's potentially going to sell out. You know, you want to be able to make that decision early on without having to wait and then figure out if it's going to sell out. And I had a really great interaction with the brand. You know, they reached out, they asked if they can send me this photos, send me this palette. I did do some swatches. I shared it with the brand. You know, I'm happy to have them share my swatches. I really do want to be a resource for people of a deeper complexion. And I'm not even the deepest, you know. I will refer to myself as someone who is a medium deep. This is probably the deepest I'm going to get in the summertime. I might get a little bit deeper if I go outside a little bit more, but this is pretty much what I look like, you know? I'm a medium deep person with a yellow golden undertone. So there are people who are deeper than me who may be curious about this. And I think the thing too about this palette as to why, you know, someone of deeper complexion is very interested in figuring out if this works is because this top row here is pastel. It's light. And if you are someone deeper, you might be like, okay, that's going to be ashy on my skin tone. So seeing it swatched on somebody that looks like you is really important. So the same energy with which I call out brands for doing things that may not be the best is the same way in which I want to, you know, commend brands for fixing things or, you know, recognizing and accepting negative feedback. And like I said, you know, my interaction with Blend Bunny Cosmetics was really pleasant. You know, they were receptive to the feedback. They understood where I was coming from, and they took it, and, you know, they sent me the palette. They definitely didn't have to. It was just a point that I was trying to make. I have no issues buying this. I've bought all of the other palettes from the brand. So there's just, but I wanted to make sure that I told you guys this, because I spend a lot of time talking about brands that are doing wrong, but I also want to highlight brands that are doing well and brands that I have good interactions with. I'm not here to protect or shelter or shade any brands. I am just going to tell you guys my raw experiences with all of these brands and how I interact with them. Because you know, I think it's really helpful when people share their specific experiences with the brands. They name the brands, both in the good and the bad times. Okay, now that being said, let's dive into the Primal palette. So I have the website pulled up here, and I'm going to just read what it says. While I'm reading, you guys should be seeing like swatches coming up on the screen. So it says, time to get primal. Some will say this is another rainbow palette, but we color connoisseurs know better. When your tones are different, the outcome is different, and that makes the whole look different. Born from the small gaps in the blends palette and color inspiration derived from the wildest and most primal parts of nature, the Primal palette is a whole different kind of rainbow. So as you heard, this is a rainbow palette, but it has different tones than the original Blends Bunny because it's meant to fill in the gaps, and it's inspired by nature. So it does come in a box that has the same imagery as the palette itself. On the box, you'll note that this was made in China. It is vegan and it has a 12-month shelf life. So it also does say that some of these are pressed pigments, or pressed pigments contain pigments, which according to law is not suitable for the eye area. So just something to be mindful of if you have any sort of eye irritation. So I'm sure you've already heard people talk about kind of like the overlap between the Primal palette and the Blends palette, as well as the Surge palette. So let's just look a little bit deeper into it, okay? So here we have the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette. So you'll see, first glance, it is a rainbow palette. Now what's different from the original palette is that you have this giant white and this giant black. As I understand it, this was requested by consumers who go through black and white very quickly. So that's where that comes from. Now here we have the original Blend Bunnies palette. Again, rainbow, and you'll see this kind of goes in rows, whereas the other one is more columns. So I do want to hold these up side by side, or top and bottom, so you can see these two palettes together. And unlike first glance, you can really see that there are some similarities in the color stories here. There are definitely some differences. I can see the tonal differences that they're talking about, but to be quite honest, there is some overlap. And now I want to show you guys the Surge palette in comparison. So here we have the Blend Bunnies Surge palette. Now this is similar to Primal in that you do get a row of shimmers, but different in that there is a row of neons on the bottom, whereas Primal has that white and that black. Now this also has very different tones than what you see in the Blends palette. So, you know, I don't really see a ton of similarities here, but definitely some. So, okay, there we go. So you can see Surge and Primal. Definitely some similarities. I'm going to do the same with the original blends so you can see that better. So we have blends and then we have Primal. Okay, I wasn't going to do this, but now I'm curious. So let's do some swatches of the palettes. I want to see how like major the tonal differences are. Now I'm not going to swatch the white and the black because it's a white and a black. But I am going to swatch some of the colored shades. So the first thing that stands out to me is this quad here in Primal. So you get the orange and the red shades here. And I want to compare that to this quad in the original Blends Bunny, where there's some orange shades there. So let's start with the orange shades in Blends, Primal, and Surge. Okay, so here we have the 3 orange shades. This is from Primal, this is from Blends, this is from Surge. So we have Untamed, Bali, and Juicy. So I definitely think Juicy is the one that has the biggest difference. And these two, this one is definitely a little bit richer, but similar enough. Next, I want to swatch these two almost red shades from Primal. So we have Lethal and Huntress. And I want to compare that to these two shades from Blends. And then you have Vexed and Self-Love. So here you can really see the difference in tones. Like this one is definitely richer. This one is definitely more primary red. So small tonal differences as the brand said it would be. Next, I kind of want to go purple. So I want to swatch this light purple shade. Actually, I want to swatch this kind of purple blue shade with this deep purple shade. And I want to compare that to this light purple and the deep purple here. So here we have Mimic and Instinct from Primal. And then we have Giggle and Bewitched from Blends. I will say that the two deep shades look pretty spot on. So let's swatch. So this is Primal. This is Blends. Okay, this one definitely leans more blue than purple, but this one is like a true purple. But you can see, I guess it's kind of similar. You can really see the tonal differences there. More blue, more purple. And I think that's all I really want to swatch because, you know, looking at these in person, I do see the tonal differences a little bit more. So I know that they're not going to swatch exactly the same. But like I said, that kind of is up to you whether or not those tonal differences are going to be big enough for you to want to have all of these in your collection. Okay, so now that I've done a little bit of swatch comparisons, not diving in too deep, let's dive into these two eye looks, and then I'll come back and give you guys my final thoughts at the end. Okay, as you guys saw from the intro, today we're going to be diving into the Blend Bunnies Primal Palette. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I think I've decided I'm just going to create a rainbow. So I'm going to do Roy and then G-Biv on this side. So it's basically going to be two looks using this palette. I want to show you guys as much colors as possible. That's basically my entire goal. So let's just dive in. I'm going to bring you guys in a little bit closer and we'll dive in. My lids are already primed and ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to start with the yellow on this eye first. I'm going to pick up the shade Ray. That is the second one down in the column. And I'm going to start by just plopping that into this inner part of the eye right here. And I'm just using this, I think it's the small blending brush from Sydney Grace. Now with this, I'm doing more stamping than actual blending. So I'm just picking up that product on the brush and then just stamping it into this inner part of the eye right here. Next, we're gonna go into Untamed. That is the orange that's right next to that yellow. And I am going to plop that in the center, blending it into the yellow. This is a very vibrant orange. Now, just cleaning off that brush, I'm gonna go into the shade Huntress, which is one down from the orange. That is the almost like primary red shade. Picking that up on the brush, and I'm gonna start by blending that on the edge into the orange. Okay, now that we have a little bit of a gradient going, I'm gonna go back in and add a little bit more color to all of these because I want to get a little bit more depth. If you want these shades to pop more, just a quick tip, you might want to go in with a white base. I'm just not a white base kind of girl. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the shade Lethal. It's like a deep rich maroon almost. And I'm going to plop that into the outer V of the eye to give us a little bit of depth here. Blending that into the red. Okay, now let's go into the shimmers. So I'm just gonna go down the line. So I'm gonna start with the gold, then I'm gonna go to the copper, then I'm gonna go to the red, and I'm just gonna blend that kind of following the same red, orange, yellow, orange, red flow. So I'm gonna start with the red first. This is the shade Feral. So So I'm going to start by putting that into the outer part of the eye, using a brush, and I'm getting good pickup. Flipping that brush over and cleaning it off, I'm going to go into Potent. That is the copper shade. And I'm just blending that orange into the red. See, that's a nice blend. Now, if you want more intensity, you can definitely go in with, you know, spraying your brush or with your finger. And then I'm gonna take my builder brush from Sonia G and picking up the gold shade. It's called Regal. I'm gonna put that into this inner part of the eye, blending it into the orange. Okay, so this is what the eyes are looking like with that gradient. You can see the red, orange, yellow. So I know I have to blend. I have a lot of blending to do just to make everything look a little bit more cohesive. So I'm gonna go back in with all of the brushes that I used before, just kind of blend everything together, make sure we have the right level of pigmentation and, you know, gradient that we need. And then we'll get started on look number 2. Okay, now to get started on this eye, I'm gonna go in with the shade Toxin. It's almost like a neon green, but not really. And I'm gonna start by putting that into the inner third of the eye like I did with the yellow. Next, I want to go into the blue row, going in with this, it's almost like a blue purple shade, and then I'm going to go in with this purple shade on the end. So I'm going to take the light blue, it almost looks like a lilac shade, blending that into the green, and that shade is called Mimic. Then I want to clean off that brush, and then I'm going into that purple shade that I showed you guys. It's called Winged, and I'm going to put that right on the outer part here. Okay, now that we've got that gradient going, time to deepen things up. So I'm going to go into this row here for this deeper blue and this deeper purple. I'm gonna first start by taking Exotic, which is the deep purple, and I'm gonna start by blending that into the lighter purple, just giving ourselves a little bit of a gradient here. Then let's go into Poisonous. That's the deeper blue shade, and we're doing the same thing. And lastly, we're gonna go into the deepest purple shade. It's called Instinct, and we're gonna use that to deepen up the outer V. Okay, now for the shimmers, I'm first gonna go in with the purple, then the blue, then the green. You guys already know where this is going. So the purple shade is called Pheromone. I'm using my Refa number 1. Picking that up and just plopping that into this outer part here, blending it into that deep purple matte that we put out in the outer corner. Okay, now the blue shade is called Morph. So I just flipped the brush over, picked up some of the blue. I think this is my favorite shimmer from this palette. It is so vibrant. And then lastly, taking a smaller brush, I'm going to go into the shade Slither. That's that green shimmer. And I'm going to apply that into the inner third. Okay, so this is what eye look number 2 is looking like. You guys know the drill. Blend until the gods tell you to stop and you think that you have the gradient that you want. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go clean up, do a little bit of blending, finish up the rest of my face, then I'll come back and give you guys my final thoughts on this palette. Okay, I'm back and this is the final 2 looks. Really liking this. Let me give you guys a bit of product details before we dive into my thoughts on the palette. About everything else I'm wearing on my face, that is. So I am wearing my Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Foundation. This is in the shade 12.5 Neutral. You guys know I love this. I'm trying to empty this. It's so close to being done. I did go in with my LYS concealer, which I've been obsessing over lately. For bronzer, I am using my Victoria Beckham Bronzing Brick. This is in the shade number 5. I kind of like this. I don't know how I fully feel about it yet. It is heavy. This really is like the weight of a brick. I'll say that about the packaging. But as for the performance, the quality, it's nice. It's nice. It just doesn't stand out to me just yet, so I'll keep trying it. For blush, I'm wearing my Pretties For Your Face blush. This is in the shade Bittersweet. It's this real beautiful, like, orange, coral orange blush, and I love how this looks. It does have a shimmer finish, so there's that, but I don't think it makes me look super shiny or greasy. For my highlight, I went in with this MAC highlighter. It is called Flare for the Dramatic. Now this one does have a little bit more glitter to it than I like, but it's a cute highlighter, so I use that to highlight my cheekbones and my brow bone. And then I went in with my Casa Gaga highlighter. You know, this is a tried and true as my inner corner highlight. Lastly, for my lips, I am wearing the Made It shade from Proper Beauty. This is one of my absolute favorite lipstick brands. They do have a satin lipstick formula, which I love, because I don't like mattes. It just feels too dry. And then I topped that off with my Pretties For Your Face Miel lip gloss, because I like this on top of it. The gloss itself isn't my favorite, but this one is a nice shade and it does add a nice shine to any lipstick. So this is it. This is the face. All right, now let's talk about the palette. So as you saw, I tried to use as much shades as possible. I pretty much used every single row, and I definitely used all of the shimmers, and I really like this palette. It is the same Blend Bunnies quality that I've experienced in Surge as well as in the original Blend Bunny Blends palette. I can't say anything bad about it. Now, I do agree with a lot of folks that this is quite repetitive in terms of what we have in Surge and Blends together. So I wouldn't say that somebody necessarily needs all 3, but I do see where this fills in the gaps. There are some tonal differences between the shades in this palette and the shades in the other palette, but if you are not like a makeup artist, if you're not into those kind of artistry looks, I don't know if you necessarily need to have those very minute tone differences. I think partly because no one's really gonna notice. If I see somebody wearing an orange eyeshadow, for me it's like, okay, that's an orange eyeshadow. I can't tell the difference between that orange and another orange. Like, it wouldn't be something that would register for me. And in order for it to register, that person would have to be literally in my eyeballs or way too close to me to actually see those tonal differences. So that's why I say you don't necessarily need to have both. Now, I also don't need 2 large shades of black and white. Personally, I don't use black or white shadows very much. I will use a black shadow to deepen up a shade every now and then, but for the most part, I would never really reach into this. I do understand that this was something that was requested by consumers, so it makes sense for her to put it in if that's what people are asking for. But for the way which I apply makeup, I just don't use this, and I feel like these shades here are light enough that I can just go in with them. Now let's talk about these light shades on top. For the most part, I can use all of these light shades without them being ashy. Now the yellow and the green are definitely the two that are the ashiest on my complexion, but they show up, and they show up well with like a white base. I just don't go in with a white base, but the thing is that they work. As for the shimmers though, what I want to say is that all of these shimmers are deep dark shimmers. So if you are someone that is a lighter complexion, I can see how this is like, everything here is so rich that it might be a bit of an issue for you, and you have to reach into other palettes to get lighter shimmers. Personally, I don't mind that. When I come to Blend Buddies, I come for that rich pigmentation, and mainly for the mattes, not necessarily the shimmers. So I would use this palette and pair it with other shimmers anyway. But I don't mind that these are really dark matte, dark shimmers. I think they look really well. I think this blue is probably the standout shimmer in this palette. It's really, really rich, really, really vibrant, super duper pigmented. So I really enjoy that. Now, overall, am I glad that I have this palette? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that I needed to have it since I have the other two? Honestly, probably not. Would I have bought it anyway? Yes. So I would have said in the intro that this was gifted to me by the brand, and I really, really appreciate that. I was planning to purchase it anyway, but on a sale. I've seen Blend Bunnies have 25% off sale. I wouldn't say relatively frequently. Y'all know I don't like paying full price for makeup. So I would have waited for 25% off sale and bought it, because I do think that these colors do attract me enough. And while I didn't necessarily need the tonal differences, I did want to have this because I do really appreciate the Blend Bunnies formula. Okay, that being said, here's my recommendation. If you don't have Surge, if you don't have blends, if you want to try this, I would say get this. If you were on the fence between Primal and Surge, my recommendation is to pick up Surge first, because with Surge you do get, I think, a little bit more variety, both in terms of the colors that you get, the formulas that you get. So you get neons, you get pastels, and then you do have, like, this shade here is at least a light shimmer, so it would work well for somebody of a lighter complexion. I personally like this color story a little bit more than this one. I also think that because this one does not have that giant matte and giant black shade, it makes more sense, because if you are not going to use a matte white and black that frequently, you definitely don't want to get this one because it has such a giant matte black and matte white. So if you are on the fence between this one and this one, I still say Surge is the best one to pick up. As it relates to blends, I think between the two of them in blends, I think this is always a great one to start with. This is what got me into the brand. This is the first palette I bought from the brand. Loved this, and I think that this is a great one. The only thing here is you don't get any shimmers. So if you only want blends for the mattes, because the mattes are so good, you can pick this up and pair it with some of your favorite indie singles, and there's that. So again, do I think you should buy the Primal palette? Honestly, it's up to you. If you already have these two palettes, I think you need to decide for yourself whether or not this would just be redundant in your collection, or if you really want to have some of those tonal differences. One of the things about Blend Bunnies is that they blend. So in some sense, you could kind of create those tonal differences by blending certain shades together. But in other sense, do you really want to do that? I know me personally, I'm not going to sit here and try to create colors by blending things together. So if you don't care to do that, you might want to get these to fill in the gaps. But I don't think that it is a necessity. If you do decide to pick this up, I would say wait for a sale, as I always do. Like I said, she even just now today, as of me filming this video, there is a 25% off sale. So this will be on sale again. It's a permanent palette. So if you wanted to wait, I think you should wait. I will say that this is the prettiest packaging out of the three though, so very, very excited about that. Alright, so those are my thoughts on the new Blend Bunnies Primal palette. Let me know down in the comments below if you picked it up. I also want to know if you did pick this up, if you think the tonal differences are big enough that it makes sense to have multiples of the Blends palette in your collection. As always, I love you guys. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will continue to use this palette. Make sure you follow me on Instagram because I post all of my looks there. Like, I post more looks than I actually filmed. So if you want to see my looks throughout the week, follow me on Instagram. You'll see that there. So like I said, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Share with a friend if you think they like the content. As always, I love you guys so very much, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye!